It's good to be with you this morning, and as I was desperately trying to put on my cassock and get here as fast as possible, I left my homily notes behind, so trying to remember what I wrote down. And as we look at these readings today, realizing that we're in kind of the middle of Lent, and God has taken us, and the church has taken us on this journey as a whole church through our liturgy toward Easter. And we have been reflecting on different themes of Lent and coming back to the Lord. And it's important, I think, to go back to Ash Wednesday, which is the first day of Lent, the inaugural day of Lent. And we always hear the words to repent and believe in the gospel, right? To repent and believe in the gospel. Sometimes we're told that we are dust, and to dust we shall return. But in some ways, that repent and believe in the gospel kind of really leans into what Lent is about. It's a season where we do those two different things. We turn away from sin so that we can turn toward Christ. Turn away from sin to turn toward Christ. Looking at our book of Deuteronomy today, our first reading, Moses, Moses is speaking to Israel. He is toward the end of his life. He is advanced in age here, and this is after they had reached the promised land. They had reached it, and Moses himself was not going to set foot into the promised land, but he had led the Israelites there. And so this is kind of his parting words, kind of his encouragement and his challenge to Israel. And he says, to remember what God has done for you. Remember what God has done for you. And remember that you may have life, that you may have this relationship with God. And they use this word intelligence in this translation, and maybe a better word might have been, without looking at the original language at this moment, I could say maybe discernment. Maybe discernment. That we're called to discern what God is doing in our lives, and to remember the justice of what God has done for us, and how he has built us up and delivered us from different things. And so, in this, there's the challenge is to be faithful, right? To be faithful what God has given us. And so, but to contrast that a little bit with our gospel today, that says, Jesus says, do not think I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill. Right? And that's very, very important. He says he has come to fulfill those things. The law and the prophets was an expression for the entire Old Testament. So when they said law and prophets, that was a way of saying everything about the Old Testament, all the teachings. And as Catholics, we Catholics, we believe that Jesus is the fulfillment of all the prophecies of the Messiah, all that content in the Old Testament, and even what the Messiah would undergo and what he would do to save us, right? We think, of course, the redemption, the mysteries of Holy Week. And in this, it says, so whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments is least in God's kingdom, and whoever obeys and teaches. And it goes back for me to just our relationship with the church, and the sense of the authority of the church. And, we're called to be faithful. And it's hard to do that. Especially when you see problems in the church, when you see brokenness. At times we see extreme forms of brokenness. We see problems with authority, all those kind of things. But I think today Jesus is challenging us to stay faithful, in the midst of that. And, sometimes we have to remember that the church has weathered some incredible storms. There was the Avignon papacy when the pontificate was, not the pontificate, but the popes lived in a place in France instead of in Rome for a long time because of safety issues, things of that kind. There have been times when popes were kidnapped, just crazy stuff that you would think, how is God's Spirit really protecting the church? How is he really protecting her teachings, her integrity in the midst of all that? But I think it goes back to that question of, are we being faithful? Are we maintaining even the little things that the church has given us and being faithful to what Christ invites us into? Because, a lot of that stuff you don't have any control over, right? You don't have control over what happens day to day in the Vatican or whatever, but what you do have control over is your own life, your own discipleship, and your own need to keep following the Lord and becoming more and more a disciple. And I think that's kind of what this reading really gets at today, is that we are called to a very living and active discipleship. And that's hard to do because, all of us kind of want to follow Jesus on Facebook. We don't really want to be like one of his admins, so to speak. You have to know how Facebook works to get that joke. But, we don't really want to be full cooperators, right? It's hard to be a full disciple, to really give your life completely to Christ. And we tend to want to maintain our distance more than anything else. So I just pray as we continue this day that the Lord will inspire us to want to be disciples more and more, to try to, as we continue Lent, to surrender more of our lives to the demands of the gospel, and to do that joyfully, and to continue to live out the calling that we have received in our baptisms.